Japan is hit by a major earthquake, causing buildings to collapse and prompting tsunami warnings across the region. The bloodshed continues in Gaza as Israel warns that the conflict could last throughout 2024. Also on the programme. Cities around the world ring in the new year with spectacular fireworks celebrations. Japan has issued tsunami warnings for several regions after the country was hit by a series of strong earthquakes. A major 7.6 magnitude quake hit the Noto region in the central prefecture of Ishikawa. So far, waves more than 1 metre high have been reported. There are no reports of casualties so far, but people in coastal regions were ordered to evacuate their homes, and more than 36,000 households are without electricity. Roads have been damaged and flights cancelled. Officials say there's been no damage to any nuclear power plants in the affected areas. Prime Minister Fumio Kishida has been speaking about the government's response to the earthquakes.
I have given 3 instructions. The first is to accurately convey information about tsunamis and evacuations to the public. The second is to understand the situation and reality of the damage as soon as possible. The third is that the government should work together with local governments and respond to disasters in a way that puts human life first.
Well, let's talk now to Robert Geller, who's Professor Emeritus of Seismology at the University of Tokyo. Welcome to the programme, Professor. So you're based in Tokyo, which I gather is around 350 kilometres away from the epicentre. What did you feel when this earthquake happened?
Well, there was a very small amount of shaking in Tokyo, but there were also emergency warning notices on TV.
And Japan, of course, no stranger to earthquakes, sadly. How does this major one compare to previous ones the country's experienced?
Well, there are basically 2 categories of earthquakes. One are the really big ones that are off the Pacific coast, like the one in 2011. And then the other category are earthquakes that are either underneath Japan or right offshore, like the one in Kobe in 1995 or the one today. So the one today was much smaller in terms of magnitude, but it was very, very close to the coast. So for the magnitude, it packed a lot of punch in causing damage and in generating a large tsunami.
And of course, you mentioned the tsunami warning. What other knock-on effects might there be from this series of earthquakes?
Well, I don't want to be alarmist, but there's a very, very small chance, let's say maybe 1 or 2%, that there could be an even bigger earthquake in the next few days. And if that happened, it could cause a lot of damage. It's certain there will be aftershocks, but maybe it's 98 or 99% likely the aftershocks will all be smaller than the earthquake today. But they still have the capability to demolish buildings that have already been damaged.
And we know, of course, that Japan is very well prepared for earthquakes, being sadly used to them, both in terms of the way buildings are constructed and also the warnings, like the ones that you mentioned. How might all of that have helped in this situation?
Well, the main thing is that if buildings are damaged, but they don't actually collapse, the people who live in them will be safe. So there were a few single family residences that collapsed. And as far as I know, the people were evacuated from those collapsed structures. But it's still early. So tomorrow or the day after, there may be some further reports of people who were not evacuated from collapsed buildings in time.
So
we don't know yet.
So you say there could potentially be another big earthquake, certainly aftershocks. What is the government doing and what could be being done to help protect people from those?
Well, the main thing that's being done is building safety and fire safety, and a reasonable but not 100% perfect job has been done. That earthquakes don't kill people. The collapse of buildings kill the people inside. And the other thing is, like in 2011, the tsunami killed maybe 20,000 people or so by washing them away. So the tsunami evacuation warning was largely successful, I think.
And what is it about Japan that makes it so susceptible to these major kind of earthquakes?
Well, in terms of geology, the theory of plate tectonics says the Earth's surface is divided into 10 or so major plates that move apart or come together. And Japan sits right on top of the junction of 4 different plates, which are sliding together. So when they slide together, there's a lot of stress built up that gets released in the form of earthquakes. So because of Japan's geological location, earthquakes are unavoidable.
So we are still perhaps in the initial phases after this earthquake when it comes to thinking about what happens next. But what kind of resources are needed when it comes to mitigating disasters like this?
Well, the main thing is to have safe buildings, and in the case of buildings that collapse, to mobilize relief forces very quickly to pull the people out of the buildings before it's too late. There's like a 48-hour window or so that if you can get the people out by then, you can save most of them. Then the other thing is to put out fires as quickly as possible. There were some fires, not too bad, and I hope they get put out as quickly as possible. So the fire and police and also the Japan self-defense forces are mobilizing very rapidly to bring relief to the affected areas.
Professor, good to talk to you today. Thank you for joining us. That's Professor Robert Geller from the University of Tokyo.
Thank you.
India has successfully launched the country's first satellite to study astronomical objects like black holes. The X-ray polarimeter will also monitor X-ray emissions from neutron stars. India is now the second country to launch a mission like this after NASA in 2021. Denmark's Queen Margrethe II surprised the country with the announcement that she is abdicating, citing age and health issues. Her son, Crown Prince Frederik, is set to become king when she steps down on the 14th of January. Margrethe has been on the throne for more than 5 decades, making her Europe's longest reigning monarch. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. Israel says it will withdraw some troops from Gaza, but warns that the conflict could continue for the whole of 2024.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us.
And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more...
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Welcome back. A reminder of our main story. Japan is hit by a major earthquake, causing buildings to collapse and prompting tsunami warnings across the region. Israel's military says the conflict in Gaza could go on throughout 2024. The IDF says the war is entering a new phase and that some troops are being withdrawn from Gaza to shift towards more targeted operations. Fierce ground fighting is being reported in the southern city of Khan Yunis, while central areas have been hit by more Israeli airstrikes. At least 100 people have been killed in Gaza in the past 24 hours. And authorities say the death toll since the start of the conflict is approaching 22,000. Meanwhile, Hamas has fired a barrage of rockets into Israel overnight, prompting air raid sirens in several areas. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent, Noor Harazin, who is in central Gaza. So, Noor, what's been happening? What's the latest where you are?
Well, let's start with the latest from northern Gaza. Actually, the Israeli troops and Israeli tanks withdrew from large areas in Gaza City and also in northern Gaza since this morning, and we have been seeing videos published on social media by citizens of Gaza going out from their homes, walking around Gaza, filming the main streets of Gaza in order to show those displaced people who left Gaza weeks ago how Gaza looks like now. Actually, those areas were very dangerous. Talking about, if we were talking weeks ago, it was full of Israeli tanks and bulldozers and snipers. No one would ever be able to get out of his home. However, now it is we can say it is calm in Gaza, but still there is some strikes in central Gaza City. In one of the strikes this morning, an Israeli warplane targeted a group of people in Al-Maqusi, which is in central Gaza City, killing 5 people. The situation here, where I am in central Gaza and also in southern Gaza, like Khan Yunis and Rafah, there is more Israeli land incursion in eastern Khan Yunis. There is intensive battles on the ground between the Palestinian militants and the Israeli forces. According to the Palestinian Health Ministry, 156 people were killed in Gaza over the past 24 hours, and this actually brings up the death toll here in Gaza since the 7th of October up to 21,978 people. 70% of them are children.
And Noor, Israel has said that the war is entering a new phase. What could that mean for Gaza?
I mean, Palestinians here on the ground, Gazans, are really hopeful. They have this sense of hope. Talking to people on the ground, they do think that maybe because of the great international pressure now on Israel and maybe what they call as an Israeli failure of freeing the hostages over the past weeks, maybe these are reasons where Israel and Hamas could actually reach a long-term truce or maybe a ceasefire. This is what the regular Palestinians here on the ground, the civilians, are thinking about. This is what they are hoping for. However, reading what is happening on the ground, we can clearly say that the ground invasion in Middle Gaza and in Southern Gaza will intensify in the upcoming days. And what happened, the same scenario that happened in Northern Gaza, will happen again here in Middle and also in Southern Gaza.
Noor, thank you very much, our correspondent Noor Harazin there in Gaza. And we'll have the latest from our correspondent in Israel in The World Today at 1500 GMT here on CGTN. The conflict in the Middle East has led to a severe water crisis in Gaza, where people are now collecting seawater for daily use. But water is a problem too for Palestinians who live in the West Bank. Our correspondent Jung Song-woo reports.
For the more than 2 million Palestinians living in the Gaza Strip, finding enough clean water to survive is now a daily struggle. While the enclave has long dealt with a water shortage, Israelis' continued bombardments have destroyed what water infrastructure did exist. Many are collecting seawater too, despite the danger of missiles hitting the beach.
The children are afraid, but we need to fill it with seawater as we use it in the kitchen and the bathroom, even for showering.
Water shortage has long been an issue for Palestinians both in Gaza and at the West Bank. The Oslo Accords signed in the 1990s granted Israel continued control over the water resources of Palestine. Israel committed to providing water to major Palestinian cities such as Bethlehem, Ramallah, Jenin, and the Gaza Strip. But today, those regions still lack adequate supplies.
The Oslo Agreement put only the principles that, okay, there is something called Palestinian water rights, and these will be discussed in the permanent status negotiations. It's now 30 years, 40 years now, and the negotiations did not start. We know now, and it was very clear from the beginning, that Netanyahu was not happy with the signing of the agreement. In general, there are 600 million cubic meters of groundwater resources in the West Bank. We are taking 115, and the rest is taken by Israel, meaning that we only use 15% of our water resources, and the rest Israel is selling it to us.
In Bethlehem in the West Bank, civilians get water only once or twice per month. So families keep water tanks on the roofs of their homes to store whatever water they get. Faraj Alati has lived in Bethlehem for 20 years. He showed us how he manages water with tanks that can hold 2 cubic meters each.
For one day, not cubic meters, you mean liters. Okay, liters. You need more than 50 liters. You need. Sometimes 80. Okay, and you have to take care. Not having a bath every day, for example, although you need it, but you can't have it. So as to spare the water, but we don't drink from the pipe, from the tap. So as I showed you, we need to buy mineral water for the house for cooking. So you have pure water, clean water.
Faraj has to pay about 50 shekels per cubic meters to buy extra water from the Israeli Authority. That's about $14 US. Faraj hopes that one day Palestinians will win true water rights and be able to control this critical resource in their own territory. Zheng Song, CGTN, Bethlehem.
The United Nations peacekeeping mission in Mali is over. Most troops had already left the West African country well before the New Year's Eve deadline. There are fears that the pullouts will lead to an intensification in fighting between the government and Islamist militants. Our correspondent Robert Nagila reports.
11th December 2023. The United Nations mission in Mali lowers its flag at its headquarters in the capital Bamako for the last time, signalling the end of the UN peacekeeping mission in the country after 10 years.
13,871 have now departed Mali.
The UN multidimensional integrated stabilization mission in Mali, known as MINUSMA, was deployed in Mali in 2013 after separatist rebels and militants occupied the northern part of the country.
Research carried out by the Effectiveness of Peace Operations Network shows in the first 3 years of the mission, MINUSMA bolstered stability in the north, reducing civilian deaths. But in the period since, its effectiveness reduced.
Support for the peacekeeping mission began to wane after Mali's military government accused the peacekeepers of failing to protect civilians. Thousands of civilians have been killed and hundreds of thousands displaced following increased attacks by militants.
People are convinced that the missions have not produced the intended result, which is supposed to be enhanced peace.
In July this year, a UN Security Council's bid to renew MINUSMA's mandate was thrown into disarray after the government demanded the immediate withdrawal of the peacekeeping force. In 2021, France announced the withdrawal of its forces from Mali following 2 military coups and the presence of Russian private security contractors.
What we're clearly seeing here is not just the UN exiting, but the Malian government making it, precisely clear that they have now established new partnership, which means the gaps will be closed. And they've also established a national strategy to deal with the insurgency themselves. So we've got to give them the opportunity to do that.
For now, the military government appears to have the support of a huge section of the population. But that support will be tested by the government's ability in restoring peace and stability where UN peacekeepers failed. Robert Nagila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
In around 7 months' time, the 2024 Olympics will begin in Paris. The French capital is getting ready to host athletes, spectators and journalists. But there are major logistical challenges and security concerns, as our correspondent Ross Cullen reports.
The world's biggest multidiscipline sporting event is back, and back in France. The Paris Olympics and Paralympics will start on the 24th of July and run till the 8th of September. More than 90% of the venues are already in place, and only a handful of arenas, like the new Aquatic Centre for water polo, artistic swimming and diving, are being newly built for the Games. New sports will be featured this time around, with breakdancing making its Olympic debut, and disciplines like skateboarding and sport climbing that featured for the first time at the previous Summer Games in Tokyo will be back. But not every event can take place in Paris. The surfing will be held on the French Pacific island of Tahiti, where there has been controversy over damage to a coral reef during tests to install the Judges' Tower. One of the centrepiece elements of Paris 2024 will be the unique opening ceremony, which will be held here on the River Seine in the French capital. It's set to be the first Olympics opening event not to be held in a stadium, but having it on a river in the middle of a city presents many different challenges. There are expected to be 500,000 spectators on the banks of the river and hundreds of athletes taking part in the parade on dozens of boats travelling down the Seine. Securing the central riverside area has the potential to be a major headache for the authorities and Parisians. President Macron said last month that the opening ceremony could take place elsewhere if a possible terror attack is detected 2 weeks in advance.
If there were a plan B, it would obviously be because we absolutely have to. We'll have to look beyond the imminent threat. And of course, this plan B will inevitably be on a smaller scale than the ceremony initially planned.
Paris will be hosting the Summer Olympics for the third time, and the 2024 edition will be held exactly 100 years after the 1924 Games. French sports fans will likely not have to wait another century before the next Olympics in the country, because France is the sole remaining bidder for the Winter Olympics in 2030. Ross Cullen, CGTN, Paris.
As Russia battles persistent inflation and Western sanctions, ordinary people are feeling the pinch as the cost of basic foods like milk and eggs soar. Our correspondent Dasha Chernyshova has been to a market in central Moscow to find out how shoppers there are coping.
Russian authorities say the economy has become immune to sanctions, but food inflation ended the year around 8%, with Russians saying the prices of basic staples have significantly increased. That is particularly evident as they celebrate New Year and Christmas.
I have indeed noticed the hike in prices. I notice it every day.
Year after year, I buy the same things for the holidays. I come to the market, visit 5 spots. I buy the same things, but the prices are going up. Everything is becoming more expensive, but we're used to it.
Prices are growing as they are everywhere else in the world. Why wouldn't they grow here? I think it's because of New Year, and it will calm down afterwards.
Recently, eggs have become one of the symbols of growing food prices. Official data shows egg prices soared by nearly 59% in 2023. That's partly due to a weaker ruble affected by Western sanctions. President Vladimir Putin took the rare step of apologizing for Russia's inflation problem.
I apologize for this, but this is a failure of the government's work. I think, although some disagree, but I believe it's also because imports weren't expanded in time, probably to boost earnings. I promise that the situation will be corrected in the near future.
Russia is planning to slash duties on 1.2 billion eggs imported in the first half of 2024, and prices are expected to stabilize. But analysts warn that Russians will see more price growth for a wide range of food products. Russians do spend more money on food during the holidays, and many say the hike in food prices is more evident than the overall inflation rate. Amid an unpredictable economic situation, they can only guess what goods will grow in price tomorrow. Dasha Cherneshova, CGTN, Moscow.
And finally, cities around the world have been welcoming in 2024 with some spectacular celebrations. London put on its biggest display to date, with the chimes of Big Ben ringing in the new year alongside 10,000 fireworks. Revelers in New York's Times Square were covered in confetti as they watched the city's iconic ball drop. Berlin welcomed 2024 with fireworks above the Brandenburg Gate, while Dubai put on a laser show and fireworks display at the world's tallest building, the Burj Khalifa. The headlines again. Japan is hit by a major earthquake, causing buildings to collapse and prompting tsunami warnings across the region. The bloodshed continues in Gaza as Israel warns that the conflict could last throughout 2024. And that is The World Today. Thanks for watching. There's more news on CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app, or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. We're back with more news at the top of the hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
Hello and welcome to Europe's weather forecast. Starting with wet weather conditions by Tuesday, the rainfall could be expected from much of Western into Central Europe, stretching all the way down to parts of the Balkans and Scandinavia, and also other places like Belarus into some portions of Western Russia are going to have snowflakes. As we go through into Wednesday, you could see there will be a wider range of the rainfall, even covering much of Iberian Peninsula, parts of Italian Peninsula and the Western Balkans. So you can keep your umbrellas handy. At the same time, daily highs will rise by like 2 to 6 degrees Celsius for much of the west by Tuesday. Daily highs are very likely to go back to lower or upper teens. On the contrary, for folks in the east and also parts of northern Europe, daily highs may first go downward and then will gradually slightly warm as we go into Wednesday. And your business and travel outlook, you could have 62 in Copenhagen. Over to Stockholm, get ready for light snowfall, -6 for the daily highs by Wednesday. Even colder conditions could be felt in Helsinki. Daily highs be like only in a -16. And eventually down to Kiev, a chance of moderate snowfall. That's it for now. Stay tuned for more city forecast.
On today's World Insight, China and the U.S. mark 45 years of